Long before paper maps or GPS, ancient civilizations defined entire territories using only sunlight and shadows. This video dives deep into the world of sun-based mapping systems from pre-literate societies, revealing how our ancestors turned the sky into a living atlas. You will discover how these forgotten techniques not only shaped early human landscapes, but also offered sustainable ways to interact with the environment, wisdom that remains strikingly relevant today. How did cultures without writing create precise borders that lasted generations? And what secrets did they see in the shifting patterns of light and dark? What do you think it would be like to navigate your world using nothing but the sun above? This connection between the sun and the land was not a matter of chance, but one of absolute necessity. For our earliest ancestors, survival depended on an intimate, unspoken knowledge of their surroundings. They watched the world with a different set of eyes, seeing not arbitrary space, but a landscape defined by light. The daily journey of the sun from east to west provided a reliable, ever-present axis, a constant in a world of variables. Its higher arc in the summer and lower, weaker path in the winter told a story of time, of changing resources, and of shifting safe zones. A particular grove of trees might be the best place for foraging in the spring, but only when its long afternoon shadows pointed directly toward a specific, strangely shaped boulder. That alignment was the map. A watering hole was not just a location, it was a destination reached when your own shadow stretched a certain length ahead of you. These were not just observations, they were the very pillars of a mental cartography, a living atlas written in light and darkness. They used what was readily available, turning a tall, solitary tree into a giant sundial or stacking stones to create a permanent shadow-casting marker. By doing so, they began to impose a human order onto the natural world, creating the first, most fundamental borders. These borders defined where one group's hunting territory ended and another's began, where it was safe to gather and where it was not, and which areas held spiritual significance. This was the dawn of land management, of social organization, all orchestrated by the silent, moving clock in the sky. The sophistication of this system lies in its elegant simplicity. It required no technology beyond a sharp eye and a deep cultural memory, passed down through generations not in books, but in stories and shared experience. This was how a world without words could still draw very clear and very understood lines in the sand. This profound understanding of light and land was built upon a precise and replicable science. The ancient art of mnemonics, the study of shadows, provided the fundamental tools for this celestial cartography. A gnomon could be anything simple and vertical, a solitary pole stuck firmly in the earth, a single standing stone, or even a tall, straight tree. Its purpose was constant, to cast a shadow that told a story. Early observers noticed that this shadow was never static. It was a living, moving thing that danced to the rhythm of the planet itself. Its length and direction shifted in a perfect, predictable pattern from sunrise to sunset, and its arc changed dramatically with the passing seasons. A long, weak shadow in the winter spoke of a sun low in the sky, while a short, sharp shadow at the height of summer marked the sun's powerful, direct presence. The most critical moment came each day at solar noon, the precise instant when the sun reached its highest point in the sky. In the northern hemisphere, the shadow cast at that exact moment was always at its absolute shortest for that day, and it pointed unerringly toward true north. This was not a suggestion, it was a celestial fact, a fixed point of reference in a turning world. With that one reliable bearing, all other cardinal directions fell perfectly into place. But the science went even deeper. By carefully measuring the length of the shortest shadow on the longest day of the year and comparing it to the shortest shadow on the shortest day, these ancient astronomers could even estimate their latitude, their position on the Earth. This knowledge was power. It allowed a community to mark the solstices and equinoxes with astonishing accuracy, creating solar calendars that dictated planting, harvesting, and migration. They could align a pathway or a sacred structure so that the sun would illuminate it in a specific way on a specific day, year after year. And most importantly for mapping, they could use these principles to draw lines on the ground that were not arbitrary, but were defined by the cosmos itself. A border could be set along the line where a gnomon's shadow fell at dawn on the spring equinox, a line that was exactly east-west. Another territory might be defined by the shadow's reach at sunset on the summer solstice. These were not borders drawn in sand, but in sunlight, making them permanent, observable, and agreed upon by all who understood the silent language of the sky. These principles found their ultimate expression in the colossal stone monuments of Neolithic Europe. Across what is now the British Isles and France, communities undertook staggering feats of engineering, hauling and erecting massive stones that served as permanent gnomons on a grand scale. A single wooden pole could mark a local path, but a circle of multi-ton monoliths could map an entire cosmos onto the land. Sites like Stonehenge or the sprawling alignments at Karnak were far more than simple calendars. They were the central processing units of their societies, complex solar computers built from stone and shadow. The famous heel stone at Stonehenge, for example, is positioned so that on the summer solstice, the rising sun's rays are perfectly framed within the monument's central archway, casting a long, precise shadow that bisects the entire ceremonial ground. This was not a casual observation. It was a dramatic communal event that marked a critical turning point in the year. That specific shadow's path effectively drew a line, separating the time of growth from the time of harvest, the season of light from the season of darkness. Similarly, the thousands of standing stones at Karnak are arranged in long, parallel rows that many researchers believe align with the rising and setting sun on significant solar dates. The shadows cast between these rows would have created a vast, interactive map. Certain pathways would be illuminated on one day and cast in deep shadow on another, physically guiding people through the landscape according to a celestial schedule. These alignments did more than just track time, they defined space. The area illuminated by the solstice sunrise might be designated as sacred ground, the territory where a specific clan could harvest a particular crop, or the neutral zone for different groups to gather. By encoding these boundaries in the immutable movements of the sun, the rules became objective and undeniable. Everyone, regardless of language or lineage, could see and understand the same solar event. This shared witness transformed a celestial phenomenon into a powerful social tool, reinforcing cohesion and preventing conflict over resources. The very act of collectively raising these stones, of participating in the rituals tied to the shadows they cast, wove this sun-based geography into the very fabric of their culture and identity. It was a map everyone could read, written in a language of light that everyone could understand. This celestial technology was not confined to the monoliths of Europe. Far across the Atlantic, the indigenous cultures of the Americas were engineering their own sophisticated solar landscapes, turning entire cities into functional maps. For the Maya, the sun was not just a marker, it was a central actor in a complex cosmological drama, and they designed their world to reflect this. Their territory sat within the tropics, a region where the sun does something extraordinary. It passes directly overhead at certain times of the year. These events, known as Zenith passages, were pivotal. On these days, a vertical object would cast no shadow at all at local noon, a moment of profound astronomical significance. The Maya meticulously tracked these days and used them as fixed points to align their ceremonial centers, their farmlands, and the very borders between powerful city-states. A boundary might be defined by the line where the shadow of a specific temple pyramid fell just before the sun reached its zenith, a clear and observable demarcation understood by all. This was not merely a technical achievement, it was a complete fusion of science, spirituality, and statecraft, where a shadow could signify both a territorial limit and a divine message. Meanwhile, in the arid high desert of what is now the southwestern United States, the ancestral Puebloans of Choco Canyon were mastering a different form of solar cartography. They constructed massive, multi-story great houses with walls and windows precisely aligned to capture the sun's rays on the solstices and equinoxes. But their ambition extended beyond single buildings. They built an extensive network of wide, perfectly straight roads that stretched across the desert for dozens of miles. Many of these mysterious roads display clear solar orientations, aligning with the sunrise or sunset on key dates. A road pointing toward the summer solstice sunrise might have served as a processional route for ceremonies, but it also functioned as a permanent, undeniable border marker. The shadow cast by a butt across that road at a specific time of year could signal the territorial extent of a clan's influence or mark the safe passage for trade goods. The road itself was the border, a line drawn by the sun and set in stone and earth. These cultures achieved a profound holistic understanding, where a calendar, a map, and a holy text were all written in the same language of light and shadow, proving that the most advanced spatial knowledge begins not with ink but with observation. This deep connection between architecture and astronomy was not unique to the Americas. Across the vast and varied landscapes of Africa, from the shifting sands of the Sahara to the sprawling savannas, pre-literate societies developed their own ingenious solar traditions to navigate and define their world. Without stone circles or towering pyramids, they turned to what their environment provided, transforming the natural world into a sophisticated celestial instrument. A solitary, towering baobab tree with its distinct silhouette became a perfect living gnomon. Its long morning shadow might point directly to a seasonal waterhole, while its short noon shadow on a specific day could signal the time to begin planting. Nomadic tribes crossing the immense Sahara Desert carried a simple but vital tool, the shadow stick. By planting this stick in the sand and observing the moving shadow, a traveler could not only find their direction but also gauge the time of day, creating a mental map where a water source was not just a location, but a point reachable by walking for the length of 3 shadows. These mental maps were incredibly detailed, encoding the locations of oases, grazing lands, and the invisible borders between tribal territories, all marked by the sun's unchanging path. In West Africa, the Dogon people of Mali are celebrated for their profound astronomical knowledge, which was deeply integrated into their social structure. They planned their villages and laid out their agricultural zones based on precise solar alignments. The boundaries between family lands or community spaces were not arbitrary fences, but lines defined by where the shadow of a sacred rock or a specially planted tree would fall on the day of the equinox. This practice wove the cosmos directly into the fabric of daily life, ensuring that the organization of their society was in harmony with the universe itself. These diverse African traditions highlight a universal truth that environmental adaptation and celestial observation were the twin engines of human resilience. From the desert to the rainforest, the sun provided a common language for creating order, fostering communities that could not only survive but truly thrive. This wisdom would travel, finding new and even more refined expressions as we journey east. This celestial language of boundaries was spoken across the entire ancient world, from the grassy steppes of Asia to its fertile river valleys. For the nomadic horsemen of Mongolia, the immense open grassland was a vast trackless sea. Their map was drawn in the sky. They navigated by the sun's daily arc, using its position to define seasonal grazing territories. A specific clan's summer grazing rights might begin where the noon shadow of a distinctive, lone peak touched a particular bend in a river. This was a border everyone could see and respect, a solar agreement that prevented conflict over precious grassland. Far to the south, in ancient China, a different but equally profound solar tradition was taking root. Early Chinese astronomers used sophisticated gnomon-like instruments, not just to tell time, but to align the world of the living with the cosmos. The orientation of a royal tomb or the central axis of a capital city was meticulously planned to align with the sunrise on the winter solstice, a day symbolizing the return of light and imperial power. They believed this precise solar alignment brought human affairs into harmony with the celestial order, ensuring stability and prosperity for the kingdom. This was mapping as a spiritual and political act. Further south, in the intricate landscapes of Southeast Asia, rice farming cultures turned water and light into a precise agricultural calendar. They observed how the long shadows of the dry season gradually shortened, and they timed the flooding of their paddies to coincide with the sun's zenith passage, when the intense, direct overhead sunlight would fuel the rapid growth of the young rice plants. The complex network of dikes and canals that fed these fields effectively became borders, with water rights and planting schedules dictated by the sun's agreed-upon position. A farmer's plot was defined not just by its physical edges, but by the specific time it received water, a time determined by a shared observation of the heavens. This system maximized yield for everyone and minimized disputes, proving that the most advanced social agreements often begin with looking up. But how did they move from simple observation to creating lasting, precise tools that could translate sunlight into law? The most powerful map-making tools were often the most humble. A simple, straight stick, carefully chosen and placed upright in the earth, became a sophisticated instrument of measurement. This was the fundamental tool for countless ancient societies. By observing the shadow it cast, a person could unlock the cardinal directions with perfect accuracy. The shortest shadow of the day, occurring at solar noon, pointed unwaveringly toward true north, while the long, stretching shadows of sunrise and sunset clearly defined the east-west axis. This was not a vague approximation. It was a reliable, daily phenomenon that anyone could witness and use. But the utility of this simple stick went far beyond just finding a direction. By marking the tip of the shadow at different times throughout the day, an observer could create a precise sundial, a personal timepiece that also mapped the hours. They could track how the length of the noon shadow changed with the seasons, growing long in the winter and almost vanishing at the height of summer. This allowed a community to mark the solstices and equinoxes with remarkable precision, creating a solar calendar that dictated the entire rhythm of life, from planting and harvest to migration and ceremony. A single stick in the right hands and with careful observation became a clock, a calendar, and a compass all in one. Stones offered a more permanent solution. While a stick might rot or be blown over, a standing stone or a carefully arranged collection of them could serve as a fixed gnomon for generations. A solitary marker could be used to draw a critical border line, perhaps defining the edge of a territory as the point where its shadow reached at a specific time on the equinox. But the real ingenuity emerged when communities arranged stones in patterns. A circle of stones could act like the numbers on a giant clock face, with the central stone's shadow sweeping across them to mark not only the time of day but also the time of year. Even more strategically, a long line of stones could be positioned to cast a collective, broad shadow. This wide, dark band sweeping across the landscape could mark a crucial seasonal boundary. Imagine a wide, shadowy line slowly advancing across a valley floor as the days grew shorter. The moment that shadow touched a specific river bend might signal the official end of the summer hunting season and the beginning of the autumn harvest. Or for a nomadic pastoralist community, that same moving shadow line could define the precise limit of their winter grazing lands, a clear, objective signal that prevented overgrazing and conflict with neighboring groups. The profound beauty of this system was its utter simplicity and accessibility. It required no rare minerals, no complex metallurgy, and no specialized knowledge held by a privileged few. Anyone could find a straight stick, anyone could help place a stone. This democratized the entire process of cartography and land management. The entire community, from the eldest elder to the youngest child, could participate in and understand the rules written in sunlight. There was no need for a central authority to dictate where a border lay, because the sun itself was the ultimate arbitrator. Everyone could gather and watch as the solstice shadow finally reached the designated marker stone, officially opening a new territory for use. This shared observation fostered collaboration and collective responsibility. It empowered communities to manage their resources sustainably, to resolve territorial disputes with objective evidence, and to pass this crucial knowledge down through generations in the form of practical, repeatable rituals. The map was not locked away in a vault. It was displayed daily across the land itself, free for all to read. But this entire system of sun-drawn borders and communal timekeeping depended on one crucial, fragile thread: human memory. Without the safety net of written records, the immense responsibility of preserving this solar science fell to the community itself, woven into the very fabric of their daily lives and cultural identity. This was the vital role of oral tradition, a living library of knowledge passed down through stories, songs, and shared rituals. A complex concept like the precise alignment of a solstice sunrise was not a dry instruction manual. It was a captivating myth about the sun god finally defeating the darkness, with the long shadow of a specific stone representing his fleeing enemy. The rhythm of a song might mimic the steady movement of a shadow across the ground, making the lesson both unforgettable and a joy to learn. Elders did not lecture the young from a textbook. They taught them through hands-on practice during the most mundane tasks. A grandfather guiding his grandson to move the herd to new pastures would point to the shortening shadow of a distant mountain. When your shadow is the same length as your spear, he might say, we will reach the summer grazing grounds. A mother teaching her daughter to plant seeds would tie the action to the sun's height, explaining that when the noonday shadow of the great oak tree just touches the riverbank, that is the signal to begin. This was repetitive, experiential learning that transformed abstract astronomical principles into muscle memory and instinct. The knowledge became sacred, not because it was secret, but because it was essential for survival. To know the stories and the songs was to know your place in the world, quite literally. It strengthened communal bonds, creating a shared identity rooted in a common understanding of the landscape and the sky above it. This oral preservation ensured that a map drawn in sunlight centuries ago could still be read perfectly by the next generation, not on parchment, but in the living world around them. So how did these elegant, memory-based systems of the ancient world eventually give way to the first drawn maps on clay and papyrus? And what was lost in that fundamental shift from a living atlas to a fixed document? This shift from memory to manuscript marks a critical turning point in human history. The emergence of written maps, first etched onto clay tablets in Mesopotamia and painted on papyrus in Egypt, introduced a revolutionary way to record space. Yet, for all their innovation, these early documents were fundamentally different from the living, breathing maps drawn by the sun. A Babylonian city plan was a static object, a fixed snapshot of a world that was, in reality, constantly changing. It was often symbolic, depicting an idealized kingdom ruled by gods and kings, rather than a practical guide for a farmer needing to know when to plant. These maps were also exclusive, requiring the rare skills of a scribe to create and interpret, effectively concentrating territorial knowledge and power into the hands of a privileged few. In stark contrast, the sun-based system was inherently democratic and dynamic. Its borders were not fixed in clay but flowed with the seasons. A grazing territory defined by a solstice shadow could expand or contract with the health of the grassland or the size of the herd, responding to the actual needs of the community and the environment in real time. It required no special materials beyond a stick or a stone, and its language was understood by everyone from the youngest herder to the oldest elder. Despite these differences, both systems served the same profound human impulse to assert order, control, and understanding over a vast and often unpredictable world. They both blended careful observation with cultural mythology, weaving together the measurable movements of the sun with the stories that gave those movements meaning. And in a fascinating twist, these two worlds were not entirely separate. Some of the earliest surviving written maps from Babylon include precise annotations of solar events and shadow lengths, proving that even the first scribes recognized the undeniable authority of the sun. This was not a replacement of one system by another, but a hybridization, a moment where the ancient, oral wisdom of the sky was first captured in the new, permanent language of writing. This control over the sun's language translated directly into political power. The person who could declare the exact day the solstice shadow touched the sacred stone was also the person who authorized the start of the harvest or the movement into new hunting grounds. This was not a trivial announcement. It was a decision that impacted the entire community's food supply and economic well-being. By holding this specialized knowledge, a shaman or chief became the indispensable intermediary between the people and the cosmos. Their authority was seen not as man-made, but as divinely ordained, a right granted by their unique ability to speak with the sun. Their word on territorial disputes was final because it was backed by the objective, observable evidence of the sky. If two families argued over a plot of land, the elder would not consult a parchment map. He would wait for the equinox. He would observe where the shadow of a specific tree fell at noon, and his judgment, based on that solar alignment, was considered absolute and fair. This system created a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle. The leaders' accurate predictions bolstered their reputation for wisdom and connection to the gods, which in turn strengthened their political hold, ensuring their continued control over the community's most valuable asset, its land. We see this vividly in the Pacific Islander cultures where master navigators held immense prestige. These men, and sometimes women, possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of star paths, ocean swells, and the sun's movement. They alone could guide the great voyaging canoes across thousands of miles of open ocean to find new islands. This ability made them not just sailors, but revered figures central to the survival and expansion of their people. Their word could determine migration routes, settlement patterns, and trade agreements, placing them at the very heart of political and social power structures long before any king issued a written decree. This reveals a profound truth that the first politicians might not have been warriors with swords, but stargazers with sticks, for whoever controlled the shadows controlled the world. This spiritual dimension elevated the entire practice of mapping into a form of worship. The sun was not a passive ball of light but a conscious, divine force, a god who walked the sky each day, actively participating in the organization of the human world. Its daily journey was a story of life, death, and rebirth, and the borders it helped draw were not just lines on the ground, but sacred inscriptions, the god's own handwriting upon the earth. A solstice was far more than a celestial turning point. It was a moment of immense spiritual power, a time when the barrier separating the world of the living from the realm of ancestors and deities grew thin and permeable. This belief transformed the act of marking a boundary into a profound communal ritual. When a community gathered to watch the solstice sunrise align with a specific standing stone, they were not merely confirming a calendar date, they were witnessing a divine sanction. They believed the sun god itself was reaching down to touch that stone, to bless the land it defined and to consecrate the border. This made the territory it enclosed more than just property. It became a space infused with spiritual significance, a place protected by cosmic law. The shadows cast on these holy days were not simple absences of light. They were interpreted as direct messages, omens, or even the physical presence of divine beings. The long, creeping shadow of the winter solstice might be seen as a great spirit surveying its domain, its touch sanctifying the ground it covered. The precise length of a noon shadow on the equinox could be read as an omen, determining whether the coming season would be prosperous or lean, thus guiding leaders in their decisions. This sacred interpretation provided the ultimate enforcement for these solar borders. To cross a boundary marked by the sun on a holy day was not merely a trespass against a neighboring village, it was a sacrilegious act, an affront to the gods themselves. This fear of divine retribution was a powerful deterrent, maintaining peace and order far more effectively than any human law or wall ever could. The entire system was a beautiful, self-reinforcing loop of practical necessity and deep spiritual belief, ensuring that the wisdom of the sun was not just followed, but revered, preserved with absolute devotion for countless generations. The landscape itself became the cartographer's canvas, demanding unique adaptations to read the sun's language. In dense, ancient forests where the canopy blocked the sky, people did not fight the trees, they collaborated with them. They identified natural clearings or deliberately maintained gaps in the foliage, creating precise, narrow windows for sunlight to pierce through. These beams of light would then travel along the forest floor as the sun moved, their shifting paths marking the hours and the seasons. A specific grove might only be illuminated for foraging when a shaft of light touched a particular moss-covered stone at midday, a clear signal understood by all who lived there. Conversely, in the vast, featureless expanse of open plains, the challenge was creating a gnomon tall enough to cast a long, visible shadow. Here, communities would invest enormous effort in building artificial mounds or earthworks, elevating a central post high above the flat terrain. This man-made hill transformed into a community solar observatory, its long, sweeping shadow providing a clear, undeniable marker that could be seen from great distances, defining territories across the grasslands. For coastal cultures, the map was drawn on the water's shimmering surface. They learned to read the sun's glitter path, the long, brilliant reflection of sunlight dancing on the waves. The angle and length of this glitter path at different times of day helped fishermen gauge distances to shore and navigate to fertile fishing grounds. A specific clan's exclusive fishing territory might be defined as the area where the sun's reflection touched a distinctive offshore rock formation at a particular hour. This was not a rigid, one-size-fits-all system. It was a brilliant display of localized ingenuity. Each society looked at its unique environment, not as an obstacle, but as a partner, using the materials and features at hand to craft a mapping system that was perfectly suited for sustainable survival. The division of labor within a community often determined who held which piece of the celestial puzzle. In many societies, the profound knowledge of solar mapping was not a monolithic skill held by everyone in the same way, but was instead distributed along gender lines, reflecting the different daily tasks and responsibilities that men and women undertook. This specialization was not about exclusion, but about efficiency and deep expertise. Among numerous Native American tribes, women, as the primary cultivators of crops, became the undisputed masters of the agricultural solar calendar. Their survival and the survival of their community depended on knowing the exact right moment to plant. They watched the shadows with a gardener's intimate eye, noting that when the shadow of a certain mesa stretched just to the edge of a specific stream, it was time to sow the corn. They used the sun's position to define the boundaries of their family's plots within the larger communal fields, creating a fair and organized system visible to all. Their knowledge was precise, practical, and absolutely essential. On the other hand, in pastoral nomadic societies where seasonal migration was a way of life, men often took the lead in solar navigation and territorial marking. Their role as herders required them to guide animals across vast distances to fresh grazing lands. They were the ones who watched for the solstice shadow that would signal the opening of a mountain pass, or who used the sun's glitter path on a lake to navigate to a summer camp. This knowledge was critical for avoiding conflict with other groups and for ensuring the herd's survival. These roles were not rigid castes, however, but fluid designations that evolved with a society's needs. In times of scarcity or change, knowledge would be shared and roles might shift to ensure the community's survival. This collaborative, inclusive approach is what gave these ancient systems their incredible resilience. The entire community, each member a specialist in their own right, worked together to read the grand solar map written across their world. This transition from a living sky map to a fixed document fundamentally rewired our relationship with the land. The emergence of writing allowed solar principles to be etched onto clay tablets and papyrus scrolls, creating a permanent record that no longer relied on the fragile chain of human memory. The Roman agrimensors, the legendary land surveyors, meticulously documented these ancient techniques in detailed manuals. They still used the gnomon to find true north and to lay out the perfect east-west Cardo Maximus, the main street of their military camps and new cities. But something crucial had changed. This knowledge was now centralized, held by specialized technicians of the state. A farmer no longer needed to watch the shadow of his own oak tree to know when to plant. He could be told the date by an official calendar issued from Rome. This was a gain in consistency and scale, enabling the coordination of vast empires, but it came at a profound cost. The map was no longer a dialogue between every person and their environment. It became an order from a distant authority. The dynamic, adaptive quality of the shadow border was lost. A line drawn on a parchment map could not shift with a drought or a changing river course. It was fixed, rigid, and often blind to the subtle needs of the local ecosystem and the people who lived within it. The communal ritual of gathering to witness the solstice shadow touching a stone was replaced by the silent reading of a surveyor's report. This disconnection was the price of precision, trading a deeply engaged, sustainable wisdom for the power to control territory on an unprecedented scale. The very soil underfoot became a commodity to be measured, taxed, and conquered, rather than a partner in a celestial dance. Yet, hidden within the ruins they left behind, we find clues that these two worlds were never fully separate. The stones themselves are finally beginning to speak, their silent alignments decoded by modern technology. Across the moors of Scotland and the fields of Portugal, archaeologists have meticulously surveyed ancient stone rows, only to discover their true purpose is revealed by light. These are not random collections of rock, but carefully positioned instruments. On the morning of the equinox, the long shadow cast by the primary stone touches the base of the farthest stone in the line, a phenomenon that repeats with perfect accuracy twice a year. This shadow line did not just mark a day on the calendar, it very likely marked a boundary on the land, a permanent solar-drawn border understood by all. Even more astonishing revelations have come from above, where LiDAR technology pierces through dense jungle canopies in Mesoamerica. This laser scanning has uncovered vast, hidden networks of causeways and low platforms, invisible to the naked eye on the ground. These pathways are not haphazard. Many are aligned with breathtaking precision to capture the rising or setting sun on a solstice. The shadow of a central temple would have traveled down this causeway like a dark arrow, its tip perhaps designating a market space on one day and a sacred precinct on another, physically organizing the city with the movement of the sun. Beyond these grand structures, we find intimate personal artifacts. In caves across Europe, researchers have discovered notched bones and carefully carved sticks dating back thousands of years. These simple objects are now believed to be primitive shadow tracking devices, an ancient person's personal notebook for recording the sun's changing path. Each notch could represent the length of a noon's shadow over successive days, allowing the user to predict the solstices with remarkable accuracy. These tangible discoveries are the missing pieces of the puzzle, providing undeniable physical proof that corroborates the oral histories passed down by indigenous elders for generations. They are not just rocks and bones, they are the fossilized echoes of a forgotten science, a testament to the universal human drive to inscribe order onto the world using the most reliable pen ever invented, the sun. These ancient methods are far more than historical curiosities. They hold urgent lessons for our modern world. As we grapple with climate change and the overconsumption of resources, the wisdom of sun-based mapping offers a powerful alternative vision for sustainability. These systems were inherently eco-friendly, requiring no manufactured tools, no mined minerals, and leaving no physical waste behind. They were built on a principle of profound adaptation, of watching and responding to the natural world rather than forcing it to conform to a rigid, human-made plan. This was a form of land management that moved with the seasons, respected carrying capacities, and understood that borders could be fluid to ensure the long-term health of the entire ecosystem. Today, this philosophy is experiencing a powerful resurgence. The global permaculture movement directly echoes these principles, designing agricultural landscapes that work in harmony with sun patterns, water flow, and native species, creating self-sustaining systems that require minimal external inputs. Similarly, indigenous communities around the world are leading the charge in advocating for land rights that are based on traditional knowledge and sacred geography, not on the arbitrary lines of colonial maps. Their fight is a modern application of an ancient truth that those who understand the land most intimately are its best stewards. This isn't about rejecting technology outright, but about recentering our relationship with the environment on observation, humility, and community. By looking back at these sophisticated solar systems, we are not retreating into the past. We are rediscovering a path toward a more resilient and equitable future, one where the map is not a tool of control, but a conversation with the living world. Yet, for all their brilliance, these ancient techniques are often misunderstood, shrouded in modern myths that we must now carefully unravel. So let's dismantle the most persistent myth that without writing there can be no true maps. This idea, rooted in a deep-seated Eurocentric bias, equates the ability to record information with the ability to understand it. But a map is not the paper it is printed on. It is the knowledge of space and relationship it represents. Pre-literate societies did not lack this knowledge. They simply stored it in a different and arguably more resilient format, the living library of cultural memory. Their maps were not drawn in ink, but performed in ritual, sung in stories, and witnessed in the daily dance of light and shadow. To claim they had no maps is to ignore the very foundations of their survival and social order for millennia. Another oversimplification paints these systems as purely functional, reducing them to a kind of primitive GPS. While their practical application was undeniable, this view completely severs them from the rich spiritual and social tapestry that gave them meaning. The act of watching a solstice shadow was never just about marking a date. It was a communal event charged with religious significance, a moment to reaffirm bonds with the ancestors and the divine. A border drawn by the sun was not a simple property line. It was a sacred covenant, a space protected by cosmic law. To separate the practical from the spiritual is to misunderstand the holistic worldview of these cultures, where every aspect of life, from farming to governance, was intertwined with the cosmos. And then there is the assumption of inaccuracy, the notion that a stick in the ground could never rival the precision of a modern theodolite. This critique misses the point entirely. These systems were not designed for global positioning. They were calibrated for hyper-local perfection. Their accuracy was measured not in millimeters, but in its flawless repetition within a specific landscape, year after year, generation after generation. The goal was not abstract cartographic precision, but functional, repeatable, and agreed-upon results. When an entire community gathers to see the same shadow touch the same stone on the same day, that is the very definition of accuracy. It was a precision that fostered social harmony and sustainable living, proving that the most effective technology is often the one perfectly suited to its specific purpose. By letting go of these modern prejudices, we open ourselves to a far richer story of human ingenuity. The legacy of these ancient techniques is not confined to history books. It is woven into the very fabric of modern map-making. The cardinal directions that orient every map we use today, north, south, east, and west, are a direct inheritance from the first observers who watched a gnommon's shadow point unerringly toward true north. The global grid of latitude lines is a formalized, worldwide version of the same principle those early astronomers used, measuring the sun's angle to determine their position on Earth. This knowledge was not rediscovered in a vacuum. When European explorers set out to chart the globe, they frequently relied on the solar navigation wisdom of the indigenous peoples they encountered. They borrowed techniques for reading the sun's height and the stars' positions, incorporating this hard-won local knowledge into their own charts and the design of their navigational instruments. Even our most advanced technology today, the global positioning system, operates on a profoundly similar concept. The network of satellites orbiting our planet functions like a constellation of artificial suns. Each satellite sends out a signal, and your receiver calculates its position by measuring the tiny differences in the time it takes for those signals to arrive, a process of triangulation that is the high-tech descendant of using multiple shadow points to pinpoint a location. This is not a story of primitive methods being replaced by superior ones, but one of continuous evolution. The foundational technology of observing a celestial body to understand our place on the ground has remained constant for millennia, simply adapting to new tools. Acknowledging this deep lineage allows us to see the grand, interconnected tapestry of human ingenuity, where the wisdom of the past is not obsolete, but is embedded in the devices we use every single day. This enduring connection invites us to step away from the screen and rediscover these methods for ourselves. Planting a single, straight stick into a patch of open earth is all it takes to begin. Choose a clear, sunny spot and push the stick firmly into the ground so it stands upright on its own. This simple object is your gnomon, your personal key to unlocking the sun's hidden language. As the day progresses, return to your stick every hour or so. Each time, place a small, distinct marker right at the very tip of the shadow it casts. A pebble or a twig will do perfectly. By late afternoon, you will have created a gentle arc of markers stretching across the ground. This curve tells a profound story, the entire journey of the sun from morning to evening. The very first marker you placed from the early morning will point almost directly west. The last marker from the late afternoon will point nearly east. And the shortest shadow of the day, the one you marked closest to local noon, will point unerringly toward true north. You have just drawn your own cardinal directions, not with a compass, but with pure observation. Now take this knowledge a step further and use it to define a small space of your own. Perhaps you want to mark out a special corner of your garden or define a play area in a local park. Use 2 of your markers to establish a line. A line between your east and west markers creates a nearly perfect east-west axis, a boundary drawn by the sun itself. Return on different days and in different seasons to see how this living map changes. Watch in wonder as the long, stretched shadows of winter slowly shorten with the coming of spring, the boundary you defined subtly shifting with the turning of the year. This simple, hands-on exercise is more than just a science project. It is a form of active meditation. For a few quiet moments, you are not checking a screen for the time, you are reading it from the earth. You are not following a drawn border, you are participating in its creation. This direct, tactile connection to the planet's rhythms is a powerful echo of our shared human past, a gentle reminder that the most advanced technology often begins with looking up and paying attention. This revival of ancient solar wisdom is not a relic of the past but a powerful, living movement. From the high plains of North America to the vast deserts of Australia, indigenous communities are actively reclaiming and revitalizing these ancestral techniques. Their goal is profound: to reassert their inherent land rights, safeguard their cultural heritage, and champion a more sustainable way of interacting with the earth. For many Native American tribes, the solstices and equinoxes are not just astronomical events. They are critical legal and spiritual occasions. They gather at sacred sites to witness the precise alignment of the sun, an act that physically and ceremonially reaffirms the boundaries of their ancestral territories. This is mapping as resistance, using the undeniable, objective evidence of the cosmos to counter colonial maps drawn in distant offices. It is a declaration that their connection to the land is older, deeper, and written in a language of light that predates any written deed. Similarly, Aboriginal communities in Australia are weaving shadow tracking and solar observation back into their cultural education programs. Elders are teaching the younger generation how to read the land using the sun, passing on stories that encode navigation routes, seasonal food sources, and the locations of sacred sites. This knowledge is not presented as history, but as a vital, practical skill for the present, fostering a powerful sense of identity and belonging rooted in a deep understanding of place. These efforts offer far more than cultural preservation. They present a radical, alternative model for land stewardship. This model challenges the Western concept of land as a commodity to be owned and exploited, proposing instead a relationship based on reciprocity, observation, and respect. It is a system that inherently promotes sustainability because its very logic is tied to the natural cycles of the sun and the seasons. Supporting these revivals is not about romanticizing the past, but about learning from it. It involves respectful documentation that centers indigenous voices and recognizing that this knowledge holds essential keys for addressing modern crises of climate change and ecological collapse. This global movement underscores a vital truth. The most advanced map for our future might just be written in the oldest language we know, the eternal dance of light and shadow. Even with all we have uncovered, the horizon of this mystery only stretches further. For every alignment we decode at a place like Stonehenge, a dozen more at other sites remain silent, their solar secrets still locked in stone. We are left with profound and tantalizing questions. How did solar mapping techniques, developed in complete isolation on different continents, arrive at such strikingly similar conclusions? Was this a case of parallel human invention, a universal response to a shared celestial clock, or does it hint at a deeper, lost thread of connection between ancient seafaring cultures? And the patterns we see are often beautifully simple, but were they capable of far more complex calculations? Could a specific arrangement of stones cast a shadow that not only marked a solstice, but also predicted an eclipse or charted the more subtle 18.6-year cycle of the lunar nodes? The moon itself is a critical piece of this puzzle we have only begun to consider. Its light reflecting the sun's would have created a softer, nocturnal map of shadows. Did ancient cultures use these moon shadows to navigate or conduct ceremonies at night, creating a parallel, silvery cartography to complement the golden one of the day? Unraveling this will require a new kind of science, a fusion of disciplines that has only recently become possible. Archaeoastronomers must work hand in hand with anthropologists and indigenous knowledge keepers. We can now use artificial intelligence to run countless simulations, testing thousands of potential alignments against the precise solar and lunar paths of millennia past, something that would have taken a human researcher a lifetime. But technology alone is not enough. The most urgent work is ethnographic, a race against time to sit with the last traditional practitioners of these arts, the elders who still hold fragments of oral knowledge about shadow lengths and sacred directions. Capturing their stories is not just about preserving the past, it is about downloading a different operating system for understanding our world. This ongoing investigation does more than rewrite history books. It opens a unique dialogue between ancient intuition and modern innovation. The same principles that guided a farmer planting by a shadow could inspire new algorithms for sustainable energy management, using the sun's path to optimize solar panel arrays. The wisdom of the past, once fully understood, may very well light the way to our future. This growing fascination with ancient solar wisdom brings with it a profound ethical responsibility. We are not merely studying historical techniques, we are engaging with living knowledge that remains sacred and central to the identities of many indigenous cultures today. For these communities, the precise alignment of a solstice sunrise is not an abstract astronomical event. It is a moment of deep spiritual significance, a time for prayer, ceremony, and connection to ancestors. This knowledge is often considered a sacred trust, not a public domain fact to be extracted and published. The line between respectful interest and harmful appropriation is drawn by consent and context. A researcher cannot simply arrive at a sacred site with a theodolite and begin measuring, any more than they would walk uninvited into a private ceremony in a modern church or temple. The ethical path forward is built on collaboration, not extraction. This means that anthropologists and archaeologists must work in genuine partnership with community elders and knowledge keepers from the very inception of a project. They must obtain free, prior, and informed consent, which means explaining the goals of the research, how the knowledge will be used, and who will have access to it. This process recognizes the community not as subjects of study, but as equal partners and the rightful owners of their cultural heritage. Some solar alignments and their meanings are meant to be known only by initiated members of the community, forming a core part of their spiritual practice. Respecting this means that some discoveries may never appear in a research paper or a YouTube video, and that is a necessary and vital boundary. This ethical framework transforms the work from one of taking to one of sharing. It ensures that any findings are communicated back to the community in ways they approve of, that they benefit from any resulting publications or projects, and that their sovereignty over their own traditions is upheld and strengthened. This approach does not hinder understanding. It deepens it immeasurably, creating a dialogue of mutual respect that enriches our global heritage while honoring the source from which it came. These ancient shadows stretch far beyond their original purpose, offering us a profound mirror for our own time. We have traced the path from a solitary stick in the earth to the silent, cosmic alignments of standing stones, witnessing a forgotten language of light used to define territory, time, and community. This was not a primitive science, but a sophisticated, sustainable dialogue with the planet, one that wove practical necessity with deep spiritual meaning. In an era of satellite precision and digital borders, the enduring wisdom of these sun-based systems speaks to a different kind of order, one based on observation, adaptation, and collective agreement. The challenges we face today, from resource scarcity to environmental displacement, demand new maps for a sustainable future. Perhaps the answers are not only in the newest technologies, but in the oldest ones, in remembering how to read the world around us with humility and respect. The journey does not end here. If this exploration into the light of the past has illuminated something for you, please share your reflections below. Your curiosity fuels these investigations. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe to keep uncovering the hidden histories that shape our world.